What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about lesson plan 1A, and we're going to spend a bit of time going into detail. We're going to cover the different areas and explain at a little bit of depth of what they mean, so that people get a better understanding of this format for the whole program. So if we look at the top of the lesson plan, it'll give you the lengths of time expected to do each part. So it says classroom work half an hour, group work 1.5 hours, written work half an hour. And those are general times depending on your group and what you want to do with your people. You'll see that it says topic and main ideas, and for our introduction to step 1 it says we're starting to build the foundations of understanding the language and the words used in step 1. It'll have then our client objectives. So what do your people have to do in this part? So learn and recite step 1, that's our first objective. Familiarise yourself with the languages of the step, and then complete client questions 1A. There's a bit next on engagement level. So as a facilitator, you're going to try and get your people to engage with you at these levels. And if you look, there's a cognitive domain, an action domain, and an affective domain. Our cognitive domain, so we're trying to get people to recall information, understand data, explain meanings and words. Our action domain, I want people to take part in our sessions. I want people to engage with me. I want this to be a two-way process. And then our affective domain, emotionally, people might find this a little bit instructive, but I want people to listen with respect for other people in the group. I want them to actively participate, and I want them to allow other people to talk and express their ideas. So I want that emotional engagement. Your next box says materials, so I need the group facilitator's prompter, the client questions, and maybe a flip chart or a blackboard or something to write things on. If we look at the detail then of possible problems and solutions, in the introduction of each step, we're looking at this just being a familiarisation session. If people aren't engaging particularly well, especially if they're new into your program, maybe having a detox or something like that, I'm going to roll with the resistance. I'm not going to force learning on anyone. I'll have some time to do some one-to-one and help people out outside of this group, outside of the classroom. So I'm going to move on. In this first lesson plan 1A, we talk about establishing your group and setting rules and boundaries. Okay. So what am I going to do? I'm going to talk about the group facilitator, whoever's facilitating. This is my group leader, and this is the person that will try to facilitate the group. I want our people to speak one person at a time. Allow people to finish. Allow people to make mistakes. Don't rescue people. It's okay if people get stuff wrong. No shouting, no aggressive behaviour. Everyone gets a turn, so don't hog the time. And don't forget that what we're talking about in these sessions are confidential to these sessions. Then there's an information section that says if you've got a mixed group of people, some that understand the 12 steps, some that don't, that's okay. You can work with people of varying levels of understanding as long as you make everyone in your group feel valued. It moves on to say, what are you going to discuss? Explain to the clients the first level in the learning process. So we're going to tell people that learning the step off by heart, learning to recite it, is our first part of what we do. It doesn't mean that they have to understand it, to get it, to be able to, I've done step 1, that sort of thing. We're just learning it off by heart. And I sort of want to interject here why that's important. If we look at, and I would like to talk about it, if we look at stages of change, if we look at those pre-contemplation areas and people's resistance to engaging in groups and things. One of the things that Bloom's taxonomy allows people to do is, if they learn the step off by heart and then they go to a 12-step meeting, or then they go into a group that is talking about that step, they don't feel so alienated. They don't feel so isolated, lonely, or, for want of another word, sometimes people feel stupid because they don't feel part of that group. So learning it off by heart is part of that stages of change, breaking through those barriers of getting people to engage. The next part of the session, it talks about learning the words and what we do. So in this particular session, which is about step 1, we may have written step 1 up on the board so that people can see it, and then we're going to pre-populate a flip chart or something like that with the words admitted, powerless, unmanageable. And if you look at the manuals, if you're using the manual, you will see that there are some explanations, further details about those words. Enjoy your people's understandings of them, explore them, talk about them, and then you're going to move on to the group facilitators prompter. Okay, so this is when you have a little break and then you come back and you do some group work. Now, the group facilitators prompter is a tool that I've invented, that I sit here with it on my lap when I'm running a group. Okay, I use it to target specific questions, and I use it to try and bring people back in to the session to engage them and facilitate learning the best I can. You will see on the left side of the GFP, you'll see the guide, what we want people to do. We're getting people to remember and know and understand, and you'll see those things if you look closer at Group Facilitators Prompter 1A. There's 2 sections of questions on it, the specific questions. So these are the questions that I'm going to start to target people with. For instance, what does the disease of addiction mean to you? Now, I may ask these specific questions to start talking about the early understanding of this step, and I'll use those tools to get people involved. If I look up to the top of the Group Facilitators prompter, there's what I call the general questions, and these are questions that you may use to engage other people in the group. So, for instance, Fred in the group is talking about the disease of addiction, and I may say to Mary, what do you think Fred meant by that? And so I'm using the tools in the prompter to engage my group as best as I can. Then, once I've done that session, I'll move on to the client questions, and these are either homework questions, or you could do them in group, or you can talk about them, get your peer supporters to help people do this sort of thing. And one of the things that I really think is important is there's a bit of repetition going on. So we remember the repetition in learning. You'll find that the lesson plan talks about stuff that is going to be talked about in the Group Facilitators prompter, that is then going to be in the client questions for them to do the written work on. And of course, don't forget, if they can't do the writing themselves, help them, do it for them, get a peer to do it with them, and use all of the learning tools that you get. And then that's session 1A completed.